In South Korea, while I was in the school days, from middle school to university, we are recommended to master 1,700 Chinese characters, 1,700 Chinese characters. But this is not compulsory. This is just optional. Because in Korea we have our own alphabet, own letters, 24 letters, 10 consonant, 10 vowel, 14 consonants. But until 600 years ago, Koreans used the Chinese characters, pronouncing indifferently. The spoken language is entirely different, but written Chinese letters are the same until about 600 years ago. I have met a lot of Chinese people because I lived in China for 2 years, and a lot of professors and political leaders and business leaders in China. I could meet with them personally and to talk about different stuff, especially about Christianity. Then many Chinese communist leaders were very much against what I was talking about. But in the end, I saw many of them were shedding tears and deciding to believe in Jesus Christ. In China, they have 50,000 characters. 50,000. No Chinese can master whole 50,000 characters in their whole life. The most intellectual people in China, like some professors, I heard that they can manage a little over 30,000 characters. 30,000 Chinese characters. And I have told this story to many Chinese people, but they did not know about this interesting fact. For example, in China, you can find a lot of Chinese characters which are from Genesis, the first book of the Bible, Genesis. And many Chinese characters were formed because Chinese characters, each character has a meaning. Then many Chinese characters are out of the Bible. But most of the Chinese, they did not know that at all. Even nowadays, many people are turning to Christ, but officially, the churches in China are not allowed, but there are many underground Christians. There is a reason why there are many Chinese characters which are born of the Bible. Because China has been under the communist regime since 1948. And even nowadays, you are not allowed to talk about Bible or Christianity in the outside of the church building. And for example, when I was in China, I was invited to preach in one gathering called the International Christian Fellowship in Beijing, something like that. Then actually it was started by Mr. George Bush, the father of the last president. One of the last, not last president. So not George W. Bush, but his father. Before he was the president of the U.S., he was the U.S. representative to China before China and the USA opened the diplomatic ties in the beginning of 1979, I think. But anyhow, while Mr. Bush was the U.S. representative, well, his level was like the ambassador, of course. But he was not called the ambassador, but he was called the representative. Then he started a prayer meeting in his residence. Actually, I think he has an Anglican church background, an Episcopal church background. Then this prayer meeting grew and grew. So when he came back to America, these people, they continued with this prayer meeting. So then when I was in China in 1988 through 1990, they had over 300 people gathered. 400 people gathered every Sunday at 10 o'clock in a big building to have their worship service. But Chinese authority, they never allowed them to have their own pastor. No pastor, there were some conditions. No pastor, number one, and then you must pay quite a lot of rental fee for using this building every Sunday from 10 to, I think, 12 o'clock. Then another condition is no local Chinese is allowed to participate in any meeting of this International Christian Fellowship. But the Chinese who have a foreign citizenship, they were allowed, but no local Chinese were allowed. But anyhow, then I was invited to speak 3 times. Then they were inviting the speakers from the people who are visiting China, if they were pastors, they were invited to preach. Then through this experience, I could meet a lot of Chinese people individually, and also in other connections. Then there's a reason why there are many Chinese characters are entirely from the Bible, even though Chinese scholars and professors and political leaders, they say they do not believe in Jesus Christ. The history shows that a few thousand years before Christ, when king in China, he was a kind of big king, a powerful king, who was very much fond of a journey. He liked to travel around, and he was very academic, very intellectual. Then Chinese history shows that he traveled far away to the west. Then he met a king in the west. Then he learned a lot of wisdom and knowledge from this king. Then the name of this king in the west, when it is written in Chinese character, well, I tell you, I cannot speak Chinese, but I can read quite a number of Chinese characters. But this Chinese character, which is the name of the king in the west who was met by this Chinese king, it is pronounced in Korean, 서강모, but in Chinese it is pronounced very much like Solomon, King Solomon. That means this Chinese king met King Solomon. Then the Bible says very clearly, in the time of King Solomon, the leaders from around the world, they came to King Solomon to learn wisdom from him. Then this Chinese king was one of them. So therefore, it is in Old History, when the name of the king in the West is written in Chinese character, in Korean we pronounce 서강모, but in Chinese pronunciation is very similar to Solomon. But anyhow, concerning the chronicles, when this king of China was ruling the China, and the same period when King Solomon was ruling Israel, exactly the same period. That means nobody can doubt the Chinese king met King Solomon. Yeah. Then that time already over 1/3 of the Old Testament was entirely, accomplished. Yes. Yeah, more than nearly 1/2 of the whole, more than 1/2 of the whole the Old Testament was already complete. Then, this man, Chinese king, when he returned to China, he gathered some most intellectual scholars, like today's professors. Then, the king, he taught them what he had learned from King Solomon. Can you follow me? Yeah. Then he commanded these scholars to teach others. Then this teaching, the teaching which king had learned from King Solomon, that means about in the Bible, the stories in the Bible, it was spread around in many different parts of China, and also many parts of India, which was very near to China. Then, from that time, after about 800 years later, two great men were born. One from India, Buddha. Buddha was born after about 800 years later. And then around the same time, around the same period, Confucius was born in China. Confucius, who is the founder of Confucianism. And then when these two men were born, only the teaching about God from the Old Testament was spread around in whole China and many parts of India, which was very near from China. So then these two men, when they were born, they already heard about this teaching. And then while they were growing up, and then later, over these two men, one founded Buddhism, the other one Confucianism. That is why when you read books teaching about Buddhism and Confucianism, you find a lot of similarities between Buddhism, Confucianism, and Christianity. That means many teachings in Buddhism and Confucianism are very similar or same, many parts, not all, but many parts, are the same what is written in the Bible. I do not talk about the names of the people, names of places, but so I mean the main teachings. But of course, it is true, they do not talk about Jesus, but that time already 800 years, but that was 500 years before Jesus was born. Then anyhow, throughout this period, when this Chinese king returned home after meeting King Solomon, then the Buddhist scholars, they created a lot of new Chinese characters, which are mainly from the Genesis, the first book of the Bible. So then, therefore, when I met with some Chinese characters which I can remember, which are from the Bible, I writing this, when I explain this, they are marvelous. And they say, oh, now I believe this. So, I think there's some kind of meaning why so many people are turning to Jesus Christ nowadays in China. I mean, many underground Christians. They have more Christians in China nowadays than in the United States, considering the number of the believers. So, when we study the histories, we can find many interesting points. But in conclusion, let me tell you about what. There's anybody from Germany? About 40 years ago, one big professor in philosophy in Germany, he said, I quote, "We German people are enjoying the highest civilization in the world," he said. But, of course there are many Germans in America and in different parts of Europe, but he said that we Germans are enjoying the highest civilization of the world. But some 1,000 years ago, while our Germans and the Europeans, most Europeans were like barbarians, then he said our ancestors, they did not know how to make clothes correctly, and they didn't know how to roast meat. So our ancestors ate raw meat. But at the same period, the people in China, Korea, India, in that part of the world, and also Pakistan the same, they knew how to roast meat, and they knew how to make clothes. But now this is opposite. But now we Germans and Europeans enjoy much higher civilization, much higher technology than Asians. But this man was not a Christian. This professor in philosophy, he was not a Christian at all. But he said, what is the reason? He said, yes, the reason is our ancestors, the European ancestors, accepted the teaching of Jesus Christ, the teaching of the Bible, much earlier than Asians. And he said, wherever the gospel was preached, not only people were saved, but civilization blossomed. And that was what a German professor, was not a Christian, told. So I really like to encourage you to read the Bible. I'm not saying that you should go to church every Sunday. No, that's not what I mean. I don't say you should be converted to Christianity. But whatever religion you may belong to, because I have met a lot of the people from many different religions, many Muslims, many Hindus, many Buddhists, many monks. I never said to them, hey, you come to Christianity. No. Whatever religion you may believe, be faithful over there. But I like to encourage you to read the Bible. Then I give the Bibles to the Buddhist leaders in different countries, Buddhist monks. So whatever religion you may have, no matter you are atheist or not, I really like to encourage you to read the Bible, and you can also go to church to learn something which you have never heard before. Thank you.